Cars have always been a symbol of innovation. Over the decades, we've seen features come and go. Today, we're counting down 18 vehicle novelties that didn't stand the test of time. From manual crank starters to pop-up headlights, let's take a trip down memory lane. Number 18. Hand-pulled parking brakes. If you buy a brand new car today, chances are that it won't have a manual handbrake. Instead, an electronic parking brake, EPB, will take its place. This is a small button replacing the once essential pull lever in the center console. It is estimated that out of the new cars, only 9% will come with a manual handbrake, and this number is only expected to decrease. The traditional handbrake is expected to disappear completely by the early 2030s. While the pros and cons of the new automatic brakes are still debated, it seems the automatic brakes are here to stay. Number 17. 12-volt power outlets. For many decades, the ashtray for cigarettes was also accompanied by cigarette lighter ports. While these were originally designed for lighting smoke in the early 1900s, they became the go-to power source for all kinds of portable accessories like phone chargers, GPS, dash cams, and even mini fridges. If you drove a car in the late 20th century, chances are you plugged something into that 12-volt socket. As smoking rates declined, automakers were less interested in including an actual cigarette lighter. Soon, the sockets were repurposed purely as power outlets. Then, eventually, these were also replaced by built-in USB ports, wireless charging pads, and dedicated power inverters. Number 16. CD players. If you've been around in this life for a while now, I'm sure your road trip essentials back in the day consisted of a giant CD binder stuffed with your favorite albums. From the 1980s through the early 2000s, in-car CD players were the gold standard for audio quality and convenience. This was a major step up from cassette tapes, which needed to be rewinded. The CD players were much more convenient and offered better sound quality. However, like all of the features mentioned in this video, CD players also did not stand the test of time. As MP3 players, Bluetooth streaming, and smartphone integration became more popular, physical media quickly became outdated. By the late 2010s, automakers started replacing the in-dash CD players with touchscreen infotainment systems instead. This decision wasn't purely about convenience. CD slots took up valuable space in the dashboards, and as cars packed in more tech, there simply wasn't room for a feature that fewer and fewer drivers were using. Today, you won't be able to find a brand new car with a CD player. Number 15. Floor dimmer switch. Back in the day, if you wanted to dim your headlights, you wouldn't do it how you do it today. Before the invention of dimmers that could be turned with the flick of the wrist, the dimmers were controlled by stomping of the foot. If you drove a car from the 1920s through the late 1970s, you probably remember the floor-mounted dimmer switch. The position of this button, which was on the driver's side footwell, allowed you to switch between high and low beams without ever taking your hands off the wheel. But like so many automotive features, the floor dimmer switch didn't stand the test of time. With time, the cars got smaller and front-wheel drive layouts became more common. Footwells became cramped, which made the floor switch less practical. In the following years, the floor switch was slowly replaced by the more complex multifunctional stalk, and by the 1980s, the old-school foot switch was nearly extinct. Number 14. Curb feelers. Curb feelers were once a must-have accessory, especially in the 1950s, when white wall tires and chrome hubcaps were all the rage. They served a simple but very important purpose. They helped drivers avoid scuffing their wheels against curbs. However, despite their usefulness, they never became a permanent feature in the automotive world. That is because for most skilled drivers, parking is not a big deal, and it made little sense to have an audible scrape against the curb. Moreover, the invention of power steering, electronic parking sensors, and backup cameras further reduced their need. By the late 20th century, curb feelers were mostly seen on classic cars, hot rods, and lowriders, and became more of a nostalgic thing than a useful tool. Today, if you see curb feelers on a vehicle, it's probably for style rather than function. Number 13. Pop-up headlights. For decades, cars were equipped with pop-up headlights or hidden headlamps. They added an element of mystery and excitement, turning ordinary cars into something futuristic. From the sleek Lamborghini Miura to the classic Chevrolet Corvette, pop-ups were more than just a functional feature. The idea was to take something basic like headlights, turn it into something aesthetic. These pop-up headlights were originally designed to find a way around the strict U.S. headlight height regulations. According to the regulations, the lights had to be of a certain shape, size, and at a certain height. In many cases, this compromised the aerodynamics of the car's structure. So the manufacturers got creative and decided to create low-slung, aerodynamic designs without compromising visibility. But as the 2000s rolled around, new problems emerged. There were new safety concerns surrounding the headlights, for example, weight issues and their reliability. The pop-up headlights started losing their popularity. Moreover, the introduction of aerodynamic fixed headlights and LED technology put a permanent seal on its fate. The 2004 Lotus Esprit and Chevrolet Corvette C5 were the last production cars to feature them. Today, modern pedestrian safety laws make their return unlikely, but they remain one of the most beloved automotive design quirks. Number 12. Analog gauges. Analog gauges used to be one of the defining features of automobiles back in the day. For decades, speedometers, tachometers, and fuel gauges appeared in front of the driver in analog forms. However, today they've been replaced by digital displays, transforming the driver's cockpit into a collection of LCD screens. However, the shift comes with its own advantages. For example, screens offer flexibility, customization, and the ability to display vast amounts of data. In fact, some vehicles may even allow multiple speedometers on the same screen. But we really cannot ignore the fact that these digital gauges lack the personality and charm of their analog predecessors. Early digital displays, like those in 1980s and 90s sports cars, had a certain futuristic appeal, but modern implementations often felt cluttered and generic. Instead of improving the driving experience, many dashboards now bombard drivers with excessive information, making them feel more distracting than helpful. Many avid car enthusiasts still believe in the power of nostalgic analog gauges and root for its reemergence, which we might see in the future. Number 11. Spare tire. In the olden times, if you were driving down a long stretch of highway and suddenly your tire gave up, you'd pull over, pop the trunk, and grab a full-size spare, identical to the other 4 tires, ready to get you back on the road with no compromises. But it's a different story nowadays. If you were to get a flat tire today, you are more likely to find a space-saver spare, or none at all. The full-size spare tires used to be a standard, especially in older sedans, SUVs, and trucks, ensuring drivers had a reliable replacement in case of a blowout. However, modern vehicles have phased them out. This is primarily due to weight, space, and cost considerations. The problem is that a full-size spare takes up a good chunk of trunk space and also adds extra weight, which affects the fuel efficiency. Another problem is that it increases manufacturing costs. Instead, most cars today come with compact donut spares, tire repair kits, or even run-flat tires that can temporarily keep rolling after a puncture. While full-size spares still exist in some trucks and off-road vehicles, they've largely vanished from everyday cars. Most automakers prioritize efficiency and convenience over preparedness, and this means the spare tire is a feature that you'll rarely find in a modern vehicle. Number 10. Tail fins. Picture yourself cruising down a sunlit highway in the late 1950s. You probably have a V8 engine running, your car is a masterpiece, with its body complete with sleek, angular tail fins that slice through the warm summer air. This was the era of the tail fin, an automotive trend that symbolized innovation, power, and style at its peak. The hype around tail fins began when Franklin Quick Hershey, the designer behind the 1948 Cadillac, got inspired by the twin rudders of the P-38 Lightning fighter plane. Soon, many other cars like the 1958 Cadillac Eldorado also featured tail fins that resembled the vertical stabilizers of jet planes. While there's no denying that these tail fins looked very cool and gave the cars an airplane-like look, the purpose of these tail fins was also to improve aerodynamics and stability. However, as the 1960s rolled around, the fins grew impractical and costly. Safety concerns over sharp edges and a shift toward more minimalistic designs saw the tail fin era fade away, making for sleeker, more functional lines. By the end of the decade, tail fins had all but disappeared from the roads. Number 9. Luggage racks. Luggage racks have always been a fascinating feature that was commonly found in old classic vehicles. It has been theorized that its origins trace back to horse-drawn carriages, where external storage was necessary for long journeys. In the mid-20th century, luggage racks became a hallmark of station wagons, SUVs, and sports cars, often seen on models like the Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, Chevrolet Blazer, Ford Bronco, and Suburban. So what happened which ultimately led to their decline? Well, you see, as vehicles evolved, roof rails started becoming a more common feature, slowly replacing the traditional luggage racks. Then came enclosed cargo carriers. These carriers were much better suited for the purpose, and ultimately due to aerodynamic considerations, the traditional luggage racks are no longer seen on vehicles. Number 8. Filament-type light bulbs. Car lighting has undergone a significant transformation over the years. We've moved up from traditional incandescent bulbs to newer options that are much more efficient, like HID, LED, and even laser headlights. Older vehicles relied on halogen and incandescent bulbs, which required frequent replacements due to their short lifespan. But this changed with the introduction of HID, high-intensity discharge, xenon bulbs. These bulbs offered brighter illumination, longer lifespan, and lower heat generation. But the problem was that these bulbs were very costly. Perhaps the biggest game changer then was the LED light-emitting diode. While not as bright as HID, LEDs offered efficiency, longevity, and low power consumption. As the industry moves toward matrix LEDs, traditional bulbs have become pretty much obsolete. Number 7. Front row center seats. Bench seats, or front row center seats, were once a hallmark of automobile vehicles. But with an increase in the number of vehicles on the road accidents started becoming more common, and so there was a greater need to focus on safety. Seatbelts became mandatory, and crash safety standards evolved, which posed challenges with the traditional bench seats. Moreover, integrating airbags and restraint systems was more difficult with bench seats. Today, they have largely disappeared from modern passenger vehicles due to shifting consumer preferences and advancements in safety technology. Only a few vehicles still support the front row center seats, like the Toyota Hiace commuter has attempted to adapt by incorporating a front center airbag, but with the increasing presence of infotainment screens and center consoles, the design remains impractical for most vehicles. Number 6. Side-facing seats. There was a time when side-facing seats were a must-have feature in every utility vehicle. One of the most iconic models, Tamara FX, had side-facing seats that allowed more than 10 people to cram in. At the same time, this was a somewhat popular feature in many old vehicles. This is no longer the case. Because of safety regulations and passenger comfort, this novelty is no longer a common thing. In a crash, side-facing passengers are more vulnerable, as seatbelts and airbags are designed for forward-facing seating. Additionally, side-facing seats cause discomfort on long trips due to limited back support and awkward leg positioning. Today, this type of seating arrangement can be found in only a few models like the Mitsubishi L300 and Isuzu Travis, where cargo hauling flexibility is key. But most modern MPVs and vans now prioritize forward-facing seats. Number 5. Hand-cranked windows. Remember manual crank windows? These windows did not require power, however they were pretty inconvenient, especially for drivers who needed to adjust multiple windows. Similarly, many parents were not comfortable because it had no child lock. The need for convenience and safety led to the near extinction of manual windows in modern vehicles and resulted in the introduction of power windows. The power windows were a lot easier to operate and had child lock safety features. This meant people no longer preferred hand-cranked windows, and today we rarely get to see cars that still have this feature. Number 4. Vent windows. If you've driven a car from the 60s, 70s, or early 80s, you probably remember vent windows. Those little triangular windows in front of the driver and passenger windows that could be rotated outwards to allow fresh air into the cabin. While this was a popular part that was featured in almost every car, it has pretty much disappeared now. Why is that, you may be wondering? The biggest reason is air conditioning. Once AC became standard in most vehicles, vent windows were no longer necessary for cooling. Another major reason was the latest cars are designed with aerodynamics in mind, and open vent windows create wind resistance, which reduces gas mileage. Keeping windows closed and using AC is actually more fuel efficient in most cases. They were also designed to provide additional visibility for drivers and help reduce glare. Some older car models still feature them, but today they're mostly cosmetic, helping rear door windows roll down further. Number 3. Ashtrays. Not too long ago, most cars used to have an ashtray built right into the dashboard, console, or armrest. Smoking was common, and manufacturers designed vehicles with dedicated spaces to flick ash and stub out cigarettes. However, the manufacturers of cars slowly started to phase out this novelty, and ashtrays have mostly disappeared, replaced by storage compartments, or left out entirely. Back in the day, pop-out ashtrays were standard, making cleanup easier. Some even had built-in lighters that popped out when heated. Today, most automakers have ditched them altogether because of the declining smoking rates and growing health awareness. Number 2. External telescopic antennas. There was a time when having antenna on your car meant driving in style, but that sure was a thing of the past. The metal rod extending from the fender was equal parts stylish and useful for picking up radio signals. Back in the 1930s, when AM radio first hit the roads, an external antenna was a must for picking up signals. And so, more and more cars started supporting these. But with time, the antenna rods have been replaced by shark fins, or sometimes are even hidden inside the glass. Number 1. Manual crank starters. Back in the day, turning the car on was not as simple as turning the key or pushing a button. If you really wanted to hit the road in the early 1900s, you had to get out, grab a metal crank, and literally power the engine to life yourself. Sounds like a workout, right? Well, that wasn't the only problem with manual crank starters. They were dangerous too. And if the engine kicked back while cranking, that handle could snap back with enough force to break your wrist or cause other injuries. While some cars had mechanisms to prevent this from happening, let's be real, it was still pretty inconvenient, and so with the advancements in the automobile industry by the 1920s, electric starters took over, making life a whole lot easier. So next time you start your car with a simple turn of the key, remember, it wasn't always like that. From disappearing spare tires to the end of CD players, the evolution of cars has been fascinating to watch. Which one of these features do you miss the most? Or is there one we forgot to mention? Let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss our latest videos.